My name's Anna, and if you told me a year ago I'd be living in a house where secrets were as common as the dust particles in the air, I'd have laughed. But here I am, married to the most genuine guy I met back in college, Mark. We've got a daughter, Emma, the kind of baby who lights up the room with her gummy smiles. Mark's grandparents, George and Ellen, are the sort who you read about in feel-good stories. Wealthy, generous, and with hearts so big, you wonder how they fit in their chests. I remember the first time I sat across Mark at the college cafeteria, him with his physics textbooks, and me with my sketch pad. We clicked like two puzzle pieces. A year into our marriage, I realized some pieces were missing, like the whole picture of his family. He never talked about his parents, and I never pushed it. Until today. So, Mark, why haven't we ever visited your mom and dad? I asked casually one evening as we watched Emma on the baby monitor. Mark looked at me, then at the monitor, and sighed. Anna, it's complicated. My mom, she's not the kind of person you want around Emma. Complicated how? I prodded, handing him a mug of coffee. He took a sip, eyes fixed on the steam rising like the ghosts of words he didn't want to say. My mom had me when she was really young, ran off with some guy who wasn't worth a dime. She left me with Grandma and Grandpa. They're the ones who raised me. And your dad? I asked, the question hanging awkwardly between us. Don't know, don't care. He was gone before I was even born. As for my mom, Liza, she's Liza. Shows up when she needs money, then disappears again. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay, he interrupted. You should know, especially now with Emma. The truth is, my grandparents are my parents. That's why they're so involved with us, with Emma. They're great people, really. I can see that, I said, smiling at the thought of George and Ellen. They're amazing with her. Just then, the baby monitor crackled to life, Emma's fussing breaking the heavy silence. I stood up, feeling the weight of the family history Mark had just shared. Little did I know, this was just the beginning, and the real weight of the secrets was yet to be felt. Life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs. Just when I thought we had settled into our little routine, the doorbell rang, shattering the calm of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of folding laundry, Emma cooing in her playpen. Mark was at work, and the grandparents were out for their weekly bridge game. I opened the door, and there she was, a woman with a wide smile, her eyes darting around, taking in the scene. Anna, right? I'm Liza, Mark's mother. I was taken aback. Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Anna. Please, come in. I stepped aside, still processing who was standing at my doorstep. Liza walked in as if she owned the place, her gaze lingering on the pictures on the mantelpiece. Nice home you got here. I cleared my throat. Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be great, dear. Black, like my men used to be, she said with a dry laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I went to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was the woman who left Mark as a baby? I prepared the coffee, brought it out, and found her leaning over Emma's playpen. Emma was looking up at her, curious and unafraid. She's a cute one. Looks like Mark when he was a baby, Liza said, straightening up as I handed her the mug. Thank you. She's our little bundle of joy, I replied, forcing a smile. So, how long are you planning to stay? I ventured, trying to sound hospitable. Liza sipped her coffee, looking out the window. Not long. Just wanted to see my granddaughter. And my son, of course. I nodded, not sure what to say. Then, as if remembering something important, Liza turned to me with a more serious look. Anna, I know I haven't been around much, but I want to make things right, especially with Mark. He's all I have. Her words should have been comforting, but they rang hollow. I could sense there was more beneath the surface, but I wasn't about to dive in. I'm sure Mark will be happy to see you, I said. He'll be home from work soon. Liza finished her coffee and stood up, smoothing her skirt. I'll wait. It's been too long. Since that first unexpected visit, Liza had taken to dropping by more often, each time with a transparent eagerness that was as unsettling as a door creaking open in an empty house. Mark, bless him, seemed cautiously optimistic about his mother's sudden interest in family life. I wasn't buying it. One afternoon, Liza arrived just as I was getting Emma down for a nap. "Oh, let me," she said, reaching for Emma with hands that seemed more used to holding a glass of wine than a baby. I hesitated, then handed Emma over, watching closely. "Thanks, Liza. I appreciate the help." Liza rocked Emma with an awkwardness that betrayed her inexperience. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about the past. I was young and stupid. I want to do better now, by Mark, and by you and Emma." I watched her for a moment. "We're glad to hear that. It's never too late to start again, I guess." Mark came in from the other room, pausing as he saw his mother with Emma. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "Just visiting my granddaughter," Liza said, her voice taking on a sweeter tone. "And trying to help out. I want to be involved, Mark. I want to be part of her life." Mark looked at me, a silent conversation passing between us. That's great, Mom. We want that too, don't we, Anna?" I nodded, the word yes feeling like a stone in my mouth. "Of course," I managed to say. "Family is important." As Mark took Emma into his arms, Liza smiled, but her eyes darted quickly to the family photos on the wall, lingering on the pictures of Mark's grandparents. Later, as we sat down for a cup of tea, Liza brought up the topic of her parents. "Your grandparents are still living in that big old house of theirs, right, Mark?" "Yeah, they love it there. It's their home," Mark said. "I was thinking, maybe it's time for a family reunion. It's been so long since we all got together," Liza suggested, her voice casual. Mark and I exchanged glances again. "We could think about it," I said, the unease in my stomach growing. "It could be nice." It was a Tuesday evening, just like any other, with the gentle hum of daily life winding down to its restful pace. Emma had finally given in to sleep, her little chest rising and falling in the soft glow of her nightlight. I was alone in the stillness. Mark was working late again, and the house felt like a quiet sentinel around me. That's when I heard it, the low murmur of Liza's voice seeping through the crack in her door. Curiosity tinged with unease nudged me closer. I recognized the tone, a blend of hushed urgency and frustration one uses when things are not going according to plan. "It's only a matter of time," Liza whispered into the phone. "They're old, and I've waited long enough. The money should have been mine years ago." Her words slithered through the crack, coiling around my heart. This was not the voice of contrition or motherly love. This was the cold calculation of greed. I could barely make out the other side of the conversation, but it was clear she wasn't alone in her schemes. "Mark doesn't suspect a thing. He's too busy playing house and acting like he's won the lottery with that baby and wife of his," she sneered, a sharp edge of contempt cutting through her tone. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This was the woman who claimed to want a fresh start, who had looked at my daughter with feigned affection. I felt a silent fury rising within me, not just for the lies, but for the threat she posed to the world I had built with Mark. I retreated from her door, each step away heavy with a new, unwelcome knowledge. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness around me filled with the echoes of Liza's true nature. The following morning, with Mark still at work and Liza out for one of her unexplained errands, I took a walk into town under the guise of needing fresh air. My actual destination, however, was the electronics store nestled between the bakery and the post office. A small, inconspicuous voice recorder caught my eye, the perfect device to capture Liza's deceit without bringing suspicion upon myself. I spent the afternoon testing the recorder, finding its range, and discovering the best place to hide it. It needed to be somewhere close enough to catch her words, but hidden from her prying eyes. As the sun dipped low and the sky painted itself in shades of dusk, I found the spot, a small nook behind a family portrait on the living room shelf. That evening, as we all sat down to dinner, Liza playing her part to perfection, I felt the weight of the recorder in my pocket. It was a weight filled with purpose. I exchanged pleasantries and laughed at the appropriate moments, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on the task at hand. After dinner, as Mark tended to Emma and Liza excused herself to her room, I slipped the recorder out and placed it in its hiding spot. The red light blinked once, then steadied, a sentinel in the night. Days passed, and each night I retrieved the recorder, scanning through the audio with bated breath. It picked up mundane conversations, snippets of daily life, until one evening it captured exactly what I'd been waiting for. Liza's voice, crisp and clear, laced with venom. "I just need them to sign over the trust fund, then I can get rid of this charade. They think I care about the baby? Please, once I have what I need, I'll be free from all this." My hands shook as I listened. There it was, proof of her malice. With the recorder safely back in its place, I knew what I had to do. I had to wait for the right moment, for the undeniable evidence that would strip away her mask once and for all. A couple of days after planting the voice recorder, I was doing chores around the house while Emma was napping in her crib. Liza thought she had the house to herself. Mark was at work, and I was supposedly out running errands. Quietly, I had stayed behind, a silent guardian lurking in the shadows of my own home. From my hidden spot, I could hear Liza pacing back and forth in the living room. She stopped by Emma's crib, and her voice, laced with disdain, broke the silence. "You're just an ugly doll, aren't you? Another pawn in their perfect little family," she muttered. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room, my voice tight but controlled. "How dare you speak about Emma that way?" Liza spun around, startled, her expression twisting into a sneer. "Oh, the perfect mother has heard me. What are you going to do? It's the truth. That child is nothing but a burden." I felt my hands ball into fists. The effort to keep from shaking was immense. "Emma is a beautiful, innocent child. She's your granddaughter." "That doesn't mean anything to me. She's just in the way." Liza spat back, her eyes cold and calculating. "Why are you even here, Liza? What do you want from us?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Liza's gaze shifted, a flash of panic betraying her facade. I just want what's owed to me. That's none of your business." "It is my business when you're talking about my daughter and my husband," I said, standing my ground despite the turmoil inside me. She scoffed. "Your husband? If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have to worry about my future. I should have never had him. All he's ever done is cost me." The harshness of her words stung, but I knew I couldn't lose my composure. "You should leave, Liza. This is our home, and you're not welcome here if you can't respect us." Liza's eyes darted to the door and back to me. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming out, her departure leaving a trail of tension in the air. The evening of the revelation had arrived almost like any other, except for the tension that hummed through the house like electricity before a storm. We were gathered around the dinner table, Mark, his grandparents, Emma snug in her high chair, and Liza, draped in her best attempt at humility. The clink of cutlery on plates filled the air as George and Ellen, Mark's grandparents, praised Liza's newfound maternal instincts. "It's just wonderful to see you taking an interest in your son's life again, Liza," Ellen said, a smile of relief playing on her lips. Liza beamed, basking in the glow of the undeserved commendation. "Thank you, Mom. It means a lot to me. It's all about family, isn't it?" I exchanged a glance with Mark, who looked as if he was trying to convince himself that this was real, that the mother he had longed for was finally here. "Yeah, family is everything," he echoed, though his eyes didn't quite meet hers. As the main course was cleared and dessert was served, a lump formed in my throat. It was now or never. I excused myself to get Emma a bib from the living room, my hands trembling as they grasped the recorder. With a steadying breath, I returned to the dining room, the device concealed in my palm. "Actually, there's something I'd like to share," I announced, my voice cutting through the pleasant chatter. All eyes turned to me, including Liza's, which narrowed ever so slightly. I looked at Mark, giving him a silent apology for what I was about to unveil. Then, with a click, Liza's voice filled the room, the same biting words from the recording echoing off the walls. "Should have never had him. All he's ever done is cost me." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it. Ellen's fork dropped to her plate with a clatter. George's face turned an alarming shade of red, while Mark sat frozen, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Liza stood abruptly, her chair scraping back violently. "What is this?" she spat, her eyes darting wildly as she looked for an escape or an excuse. "Tell them, Liza," I said firmly. Tell them how you really feel about your family." Mark finally found his voice, a mixture of hurt and anger. "Mom? What's she talking about? What is this?" Liza's facade crumbled, her shoulders slumping as the weight of her own words bore down on her. "It's nothing. It's not what it sounds like." "But it is, Liza," I interjected. "It's exactly what it sounds like. You only came back for the money. You don't care about us, about Emma. You said it yourself." The betrayal was stark on Mark's face, a portrait of a son coming to terms with the harsh truth about his mother. Ellen was weeping silently, her hands covering her mouth, and George? He stood up, the very picture of wrath aged, but not weakened by years. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are no daughter of mine." Liza looked around, her eyes desperate for any sign of sympathy, but found none. Without another word, she left. The aftermath of the dinner was a quiet storm. Mark and I cleaned up the table in silence, the clinking of the dishes punctuating the heavy air. George sat motionless, staring at the space where Liza had been, and Ellen dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, the remnants of her tears still evident. "I can't believe she would say those things," Ellen finally whispered, her voice a fragile thread. George reached over, his hand covering hers. "We knew she was troubled, but this is unforgivable." Mark hadn't said a word since Liza left. He was lost in thought, his eyes clouded with a mix of emotions. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I knew he needed a moment to process everything. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, everyone. I thought maybe she had changed." "You have nothing to apologize for," I told him, placing a hand on his arm. "We all wanted to believe in her, for your sake." George rose from his chair, a sense of purpose ironing out the lines of fatigue on his face. "I'll have my lawyer here first thing in the morning. We need to make things right, legally. Liza can't be allowed to do any more damage." The next morning, the lawyer, Mr. Hammond, was as good as George's word. He arrived with papers in hand, ready to amend wills and trusts and ensure Liza's deceit wouldn't be rewarded. "As of today, she will be removed from all documents pertaining to your estate," Mr. Hammond said, his pen poised over the paper. Mark nodded solemnly. "Do it. I don't want her to have any claim to anything after what she's done." "And what about you, Mark?" Mr. Hammond asked, looking up. "This will mean a significant change in the distribution of assets." Mark looked at Emma, who was gurgling happily in her high chair, blissfully unaware of the gravity in the room. "I want to make sure Emma's future is secure. That's all that matters to me." "And it shall be done," Mr. Hammond assured him, his pen scratching the changes into permanence. As the lawyer left, Ellen came over to us, her usual warmth slowly returning. "You did the right thing, Mark. And Anna, we can't thank you enough for bringing the truth to light." "It's not me who you should be thanking," I said, squeezing her hand. "It's Emma. She's the one who brought us all together." Mark pulled me into a hug, his embrace a silent thank you for standing by him through the storm. "We'll get through this," I whispered. "Together." George, standing by the window, looked over at us, a soft smile breaking through. "We've weathered worse, haven't we, Ellen?" "That we have," she agreed, her hand finding his. One evening, as Mark and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he broke the silence. "You know, I keep thinking about what happened. I can't shake it off." I reached over, squeezing his hand. "It's going to take time, Mark. What your mom did, it left a scar." He nodded, looking out at the horizon. "I just feel so foolish. How could I not see what she was really after?" "You wanted to see the best in her. That's not foolish. That's just you being you," I said, trying to offer comfort. Emma babbled from her playmat, the sound like a balm to our wounded spirits. Mark smiled down at her. "At least we have Emma. She's the best part of all this." "And your grandparents," I added. "They've been amazing through everything." "Yeah," Mark agreed. "I guess I've always known I was lucky to have them." A few days later, we gathered for a small family dinner, just the four of us and Emma. George and Ellen had regained some of their old spark, the betrayal now a painful memory rather than a fresh wound. Mark, Anna, we've been thinking, George began, his voice steady. We want to set up a trust fund for Emma, for her education, her future. That's very generous of you, I said, touched by their thoughtfulness. Mark was quiet for a moment, then looked up with tear-filled eyes. Thank you. It means a lot, knowing she'll have that security. Ellen got up and came over to where Emma was trying to stack blocks with more enthusiasm than accuracy. This little one is the future, she said, picking her up. We need to make sure it's a bright one. The conversation turned lighter then, drifting to everyday things. The garden needing tending, the car making a funny noise, plans for Emma's first birthday. Normal life, with all its small but significant details. After dinner, as I put Emma to bed, Mark came in and wrapped his arms around me. I don't know what I would have done without you, Anna. You've been my rock. I leaned back against him. I'll always be here, for you and for Emma. We're a team. He kissed the top of my head, and we stood there in silence, watching our daughter sleep. The journey had been rough, the road twisted with deception and hurt, but we had come through it, not unscathed, but stronger.